Welcome to Paranormal M, where the supernatural takes center stage. Subscribe and enable notifications to stay updated on our latest haunting stories. Brace yourself for the journey into the unknown. The strangest nighttime happenings. So I live in a block of flats. Not the most modern, but not unmodern by any means. For years, I've had various forms of parasomnic activities. Sleepwalking, talking, sleep paralysis, nightmares, insomnia. But still moving into my new flat, the talking and walking has intensified. When we first moved into my boyfriend thought he just saw a few strange things. I dismissed these as the flat don't seem old enough to be haunted. A few weeks ago, I had a nightmare about demons that screamed in real life. In my dream, I flung myself off the bed to quote-unquote escape, and I injured myself on a radiator. Freaked me out quite a bit, but that didn't strike me as haunted, just a bit scary. Now, the paranormal. I couldn't sleep one night at all, was on the phone for a bit until maybe 2:30. When I tried to sleep, it wasn't working. After around an hour, I decided I needed to go pee. If I didn't, I knew that I wouldn't be able to fall asleep, so rather reluctantly I took myself to the toilet. I upped my phone brightness while trying to avoid looking at the time because I would have been depressed at all the sleep I was missing. I used to shine a light, sort of a light with it, but I could see my way with it. As it was so late my boyfriend was asleep, I decided to keep the door open, otherwise I'd have to be in total darkness, which, would have been terrifying. So, I'm sat on the toilet with the door just over arm's width away from my face with the light facing away from me. I'm halfway through peeing. Illuminated by my phone, I see the door handle slowly moving down. Again, about an arm and a bit away. I freeze, it jolts back up and repeats slowly again. At this point, I'm trying to make sense of what's happening. That's when in 4 loud successive motions the handle goes up and down quite aggressively. Bearing in mind I'm mid-flow, I stop peeing and jump up and shout, "Fuck off!" And just absolutely Usain bolted back to the bedroom. My boyfriend is asleep this whole time. No one else is in our flat and I just lay in bed completely covered, absolutely sweating might I add. I was too scared to close my eyes in case God knows what decides to come back. Needless to say, it was a very restless few hours of sleep in the morning. I have to go call my mom just to be able to go back to the bathroom. I'm absolutely terrified. My boyfriend has seen a few weird things. Things blowing around without wind and things going missing. But nothing like my experience, and I haven't had anything like that before or since. My boyfriend brought something or someone in. Or it's just that time of the year. My boyfriend moved in recently as we're expecting a baby in May. We've both been sensitive to paranormal occurrences in our life, living in haunted houses or seeing the unexplained. But this is a bit different. I've lived in this apartment for 3 years. I felt nothing but peace, aside from having the neighbors from hell for 2 of those years, but nothing paranormal. The air is light. You don't feel anything menacing. In previous homes I've lived in, I could feel a presence as if someone's there. And as far-fetched as it sounds, I do consider myself somewhat of a clairvoyant. There are several events in my life that I had predicted correctly. It's almost Halloween. Things in the house started moving around. I don't know if it's because the veil is thinning or if it's because my birthday's arrived. This is not a post to get birthday wishes, by the way. Oh wow, happy birthday. Or the thing that's been following my boyfriend around his entire life has made its way into my home. Some instances that occurred in the past 3 days. The deodorant in my clear work bag physically lifted up in the bag and dropped. The bag has stayed in the same place for the past 4 days. Washed silverware sitting in the dish rack was heard clinking together. A bottle of cleaning solution that was placed on the top of the refrigerator flew down to the ground as my boyfriend walked out of the kitchen. My state passes out candy the Thursday before Halloween. It's so lame, I know, but what do you mean the state passes out candy? And as I was sitting on my porch in front of my closed door, I heard footsteps shuffle up behind me. I looked around to see if any kids were walking up and down the street. They were empty. There is no way and no room for somebody to sneak behind me. Several loud knocks were heard just an hour before this was posted. However, I am willing to explain most of these occurrences away with logic. I have 3 dogs and 4 cats. It's an animal parade. I feel ya. They're very reactive to sounds and presences. Example. My dogs freak out and bark at the neighborhood raccoons making their nightly rounds to everyone's trash cans. They have not barked or acted strangely. My cats do like to tumble and play roughly with each other upstairs, causing the knocking sounds. The cleaning solution can be explained by my heavily footed boyfriend walking by the refrigerator, the bottle falling at the right angle to get a good distance. My boyfriend thinks he brought something or someone with him when he moved in. If he did, I don't think it's anything malevolent. But with it being my birthday and being so close to Halloween, I'm willing to conscript to the idea that it's maybe my father who passed away when I was 7, wishing me a happy birthday. This is sort of genuinely the happiest one, or maybe the happiest one I've had since his passing 19 years ago. Or I could just be, pregnant and pregnancy brain making us go a little crazy during this time of year. And all of this is completely explained away. What do you think? Well, I hope you all have had a happy Halloween. Congratulations. I had paranormal encounters at an old Soviet summer camp. I used to work at an old Soviet camp in rural Ukraine. It used to be a summer camp for children. Now its current owners are renovating it. Anyway, I worked installing heating in a smaller building 400-ish meters away from the main facility. To get there, you have to pass near a small silicate brick building. I don't know its purpose, but it is relevant. So one day in the middle of August, I was coming back from lunch break and was going towards that little building. It was painted white and had tiny square windows on each side of the door. It was square. Each wall was around 10 feet long and 7 feet high. As I came closer, I noticed something moving behind it. I was around 25 meters away from it, but I didn't pay much attention to it. I first thought it was merely a reflection of light because I have astigmatism. But I also had that same feeling, like when I encountered anything supernatural. I did have paranormal encounters before. As I came closer, what I saw made my skin crawl. It was a pallid blue girl's face staring at me with a toothy grin. It wasn't an illusion or hallucination. When I picked up the pace, its gaze followed me and the head turned. It looked almost normal, except for the stretched skin and uneven expression. I saw it very clearly. That girl looked like she had been asphyxiated. After that, I heard screams varying in pitch when I passed that shed. I also saw red eyes staring at me from unlit rooms, and the perpetual feeling of being watched was wild. My intuition tells me that she's, like that girl, is not like the only ghost and entity here. I finished working at that camp a week ago. Sadly, I don't have my phone at the time, so I don't have any pictures of that small building. Navajo Mountain Reservation, Utah. My father and uncle have a kind of a story, you could say. A story of living as outsiders. like non-native Caucasian. So, young people on the reservation. Their tale of experiencing a skinwalker. Oh, my grandma taught school on the reservation. They lived well off compared to the natives living there. And from what I know, there's a lot of lore surrounding the Navajo Nation. Non-natives, primarily older generations, keeping their experiences and stories left unspoken, especially to those not from the culture. Forgive me if I'm mistaking any of this, the culture, ideology, practices, or any other part. I'm just trying to tell the story my family has only spoken to me in whispers about. My grandmother, father, and uncle lived there for a few years. Their experience was much different than the Navajo people who've lived there for generations upon generations. I just want to tell their story and get insight as to anybody else who's lived in that community and any other stories some people might be willing to share. My father and uncle are about 2 years apart in age. They lived in Navajo mountains in the maybe 1980s, about there. My dad was 10, maybe 12, and my uncle's a bit younger. As it goes, they were always outside riding bikes with their friends, natives of the reservation. My grandma was recovering from an abusive relationship with her father, wasn't too concerned with their whereabouts, being it was a small community. There wasn't much trouble around, nor would they know what real trouble was at that age. Trouble wasn't the issue to young white boys in a reservation then. Pure terror was. It was a typical night without any parental supervision. The night was colder than usual. The night sky was blacker than you can imagine. In such a desolate place, the stars in the sky would light the night. This night was as if the earth had moved to a different dimension, an abyss. The boys raced each other as they did every night, till they were compelled to force their brakes in unison. They simultaneously looked up, each boy's face melted from carefree, innocent adolescent to unadulterated horror. The boys stood motionless, grasping their bikes with every nerve, muscle, and strength in their body onto the dirt road. To the right of them was a mesa, one that they rode by every day, the mesa that paralleled from my family's home. The mesa that they could see through my father and my uncle's bedroom every night. This mesa would become fear and nightmares to them from this night forward. At the top of the mesa was a roaring fire, taller than any bonfire that somebody could assemble, bigger than a group of people could assemble. It raged and was unbelievable. It was almost as tall as the mesa itself. More unbelievable was the pitch-black figure seen cavorting around the bonfire. The native boys of my father and uncle informed them that this was not a typical Navajo dance or ritual. Pits began to form in their stomachs. Friends of my father and uncle turned back around with the word and bolted back to their homes. My father and uncle threw their bikes to the ground and ran across the unpaved road into their home. The two came back in a panic, relaying what they had seen to my grandmother. She was unconcerned. A legend of the natives, she told them, shooed them away. They laid awake all night in their shared room, not saying a word to another. They forced their curtains as closed as possible, too scared to look out the window and see what they shouldn't have to begin with. Neither could shake the images burnt into their memory, but the sun managed to rise and peek through into their room. A sense of release washed over them as the darkness had faded. The boys left their beds, traveled to the kitchen to try a second time to tell my grandmother what they had saw that night. They tried to get a handle on what they saw, but it was as if they couldn't explain it. Again, my grandmother brushed them off, the coffee and newspaper more important than their story. She told them to climb the mesa and to investigate. The boys wrangled the friends who shared the experience with the night prior. The friends stayed on the dirt road, looked up at the mesa as my father and uncle climbed up to see any evidence of the hell-burning fire they witnessed together. The mesa wasn't much taller than an average one-story house. so the brothers took less than 2 minutes to climb to the top where the nightmare took place. When they got to the top, they were hysterical and also relieved. There was no indication of a bonfire of that enormity, or even a fire at all that had taken place on the mesa. They climbed down and told the message to friends who had also been part of the shocking scene. Their native friends looked at them in shock, but neither said a word to them. They immediately turned their bikes around and proceeded home. It's never talked about again, despite my father and brother asking about it. My grandmother and everyone else in the community refused to talk about it again. My father, he's a skeptic. He doesn't believe in anything paranormal. Aliens, ghosts, mermaids, you name it. But whenever I ask about the skinwalker he saw, he turns pale and white. He gets quiet, jumpy, and curt. I had to plead to get the full story out of him, and I could see goosebumps and every hair standing up in his arms when he shared his experience. My grandma took me to the Navajo Mountains in 2019 to show me her history and to see how Navajo natives still live on this reservation today. According to her, not much had changed since living there in the 80s. I hiked and explored what I could of the reservation. That's not to invade or violate any of the Navajo reservations and its beauty. However, I did feel a change in mood when I visited. My existence felt heavy, as if I wasn't supposed to be there, or if I was invading on territory that wasn't meant for me. Not caused by any of the community there, but just by my presence being on the land. I'll never forget my experience of visiting and all that I learned about reservation life. I climbed the mesa where the skinwalker my dad and uncle had as ritual. I felt pretty normal until I got to the top, stood in the middle. I felt some darkness creep into me as I stood there. I have never been the same since. Looking at yourself in sudden death. Long one. So about 3 months ago, I was on my way home from my second oldest son's house. It was a late evening, but still daylight. The road that I was traveling was a state route 2-lane. The area is rural, with a combination of cornfields and woods with quite a few hilly areas. Traffic was fairly light. At one point, I come upon a fire truck blocking the roadway. The road was closed, so I turned around and, being familiar with the area, made my way around the closure and went on. I texted, let's just, say somebody that I know that's on the local sheriff's department, and asked what was going on with the road being closed. Now, before he answered me back, I had an overwhelming feeling hit me to stick around in the area. There's a cemetery close to that area that I go to quite often, record videos and audio. So that's where I started heading to. I then get the response that it's a fatal crash with a car versus a truck head-on. Female driver deceased, she's from the area. After I pulled into the cemetery, I got another message. This one had 2 photos attached to it. I opened the attachments and it was as horrible as I imagined it was. One photo was of her car, totally destroyed. Sheet still covering the driver compartment. No, her body was not visible. There were 2 firefighters in the photo. One standing at the driver's door looking down into the car. Next to him was the medical examiner, I believe, who was also looking down into the driver area. The second firefighter was standing on the passenger side of the door. He too was staring down into the driver area. All 3 had a somber look on their face. The look made you think that they're thinking of themselves, what a shame, what a waste, too young. Now in the background of this photo is what you'd expect to see. A fire truck, another emergency vehicle, and of course trees and so on. It's daylight with clear skies. I'm trying to allow the reader to see what's in the photo without sharing the photo itself. Now, I had been given the deceased driver's name because due to the career that I retired from, I had dealt with her on several occasions, and he knew that. He too had dealt with her a couple of times. Now, as I sat there in the cemetery looking at this photo, I kept getting that overwhelming feeling that I was missing something that was in the photo. And that inner voice, if you want to call it that, kept telling me to look again. Keep looking. So that's exactly what I did. I kept looking at it. Finally, something said enlarge it. Zoom in on the 2 of the driver door. It was almost like something was begging me to keep looking and not to stop until I found it. So that's what I did. Then it was like a hammer hit me in the head. Every hair in my body stood on end all at once. I gasped for a breath of air and I became physically sick to my stomach. As I'm writing this, I have tears in my eyes and I'm fighting not to cry. As I stated, I knew this female, but it had been a few years since I dealt with her. But there was no denying it in that photograph of the crash scene just behind the 2 EMS workers standing at the driver's door was the face of the deceased driver. I could not believe what I was looking at. For me, there was no denying that she was standing behind them, looking down into the driver's compartment. The look on her face was the look of complete and total shock, like she was staring at her own body crumpled up in the floorboard area, asking herself, why? What have I done? About my daughter? She wound up leaving a 5-year-old daughter behind. I took a screenshot of the enlarged photo to show to the deputy. He's somewhat of a skeptic. The following day I went to see him and I got the full story of what apparently took place before I showed him the screenshot. The look on her face is explained more when I heard what led to the crash. I'm not going to release the information out of respect for her family. They've paid too much already. So I told him that I wanted him to look at the enlarged version of the photo that I was sent. When I held it up for him to see, his face instantly, without hesitation, went white, eyes opened wide, and jaw dropped. He gasped for air and looked at me and said, "That's her. There's no way that's not possible, because she was dead when that was taken." Now, I shown that photo to a limited number of people, just out of, privacy for her and her family, but everybody that has seen it, all have the same reaction. They all see her face instantly without being told what they're looking for, what they might see. In the photograph, her appearance is what she looked like several years ago. Original hair color and style. In the 23 plus years of my job, I've seen a lot of death. I've had people, including children, literally die in my arms. I've handled a lot of crashes with fatalities where I took the photos, and I have never had this happen. I had heard of it, but didn't really believe it could happen. Well, I'm no longer skeptical of this type of thing taking place where death was instant and traumatic. Haunted dorm. In 2013, I was a freshman in college. There are always university stories with haunted dorms, rooms, or basements. So I never thought anything of it when I heard that our dorm, Rogers Hall, was very haunted. Within the first 3 weeks, 5 girls attempted to commit suicide by jumping off the building. Thankfully, they were unsuccessful. But it for sure rocked us and made us start to believe that there may be an angry presence hanging around. One early morning, my roommate and I were asleep. We always left the TV on and we were in bunk beds. This is kind of an important story. Normally, my roommate couldn't get out of bed without, waking me up. But when I woke up, I didn't have my glasses on, but I could see a girl standing in front of her TV. She had medium brown hair and was wearing a gray sweatshirt and some jeans. She looked like she was chewing on her sleeve. I immediately thought that it was my roommate and rolled over to turn on my desk lamp and grab my glasses to ask her why she was up so early. When I flipped on the light and grabbed my glasses, she was gone. Thought maybe my roommate went to the bathroom, so got out of bed and looked up at her bed and she was still sleeping. I shook her awake and asked her how she got up there so quickly. She had no idea what I was talking about. The same day, maybe within a few hours, our friend that lived down the hall went to the communal bathroom. was washing her face. The door to the bathroom was very heavy and scraped the floor when you opened it. She said she heard somebody open the bathroom door. She saw somebody walk behind her. She didn't think anything of it because it was our floor's bathroom and girls were waking up to get ready for classes. On one side of the bathroom, there were toilets. On the other side of the bathroom, there were showers. But there were sinks and mirrors in the middle of both sides. Our friend was on the side of the showers. She said that she saw the girl walk into the shower. And as she was washing her face, she never heard the shower turn on. She called over to her asking if everything was okay. She even walked over to see if the girl needed help. There was no one there. Nothing ever happened again to either of us that year, but it still creeps me out. It wanted me alone in the garage. A lot of things went down in this house, but out of all of the spooky things that have happened to me here, this one just crossed my mind after 18 years. I was 14 years old living in Orange County with my 2 sisters and my mother. We had a rough upbringing, so renting an actual house was like a dream come true for us at that time. Till we realized that we were living in a haunted house. I was with my mom the day we rented. The garage was scary as hell, even in the daylight with people around. It just always gave me a clustered feeling of something being there that I couldn't see. When the garage door was shut, it was pitch black. No light at all from outside could get through that garage door. During the summer, I would wake up early, listen to my CDs on my radio. So every time I came in or out, I made sure my bedroom door was shut because my mom liked to sleep in the living room on the couch right outside my bedroom. I would clean my room, the kitchen, the bathroom before I'd ask my mom if I could meet my best friend at her halfway mark. This particular morning, the funky, spooky things of the house started early. As I walked out of the bedroom, shut my door, walked down the hall, passing 2 bedroom to the restroom, I noticed something from the corner of my eye in the kitchen, like a silhouette of a person that vanished. Apparently, this was normal. My mom's bedroom was directly outside the bathroom doorway to the right. It had a private bathroom which led to the garage. Well, as I was walking out of the restroom, I seen a person walking into my mom's bedroom. Like a woman, which I assumed was my mother since we were the only ones home. Thinking it was my mom, I was talking to her about leaving my friends and the bedroom door shut on my face, and I was like, wow, she's rude today. So I opened the door and again asked if I could go to my friends with her. The bathroom door started shutting. When I opened the bathroom door and said, Mom, I realized the garage door was wide open. The garage door was heavy and it didn't stay open on its own ever. It was pitch black, and in that moment I knew it wasn't my mom. I ran out, shut her bedroom door behind me, started toward my bedroom, and I noticed my bedroom door was wide open too. I was standing in my room confused and realized my radio was off. I tried turning it multiple times. I seen it was actually unplugged. Went to the living room to wake my mom up and ask if she had went into my room to unplug my radio. She said she didn't ever go into my room or touch my radio that morning. She was sleeping still. I don't even know why I had to ask if she went to the garage through her bedroom for clarification, but needless to say, it wasn't her either. She asked me please not to leave her, or rather, she asked me please not to leave her there alone. But I did, and I feel kind of bad still. Anyways, that night I didn't want to come back home. I know whatever it was this time, it wanted me in that garage alone. Apartment 201. Both me and my girlfriend were so excited to move in together. It was our first place. We had high hopes. I remember the first time we stepped foot inside the apartment so vividly. Never been one to believe in the supernatural. Not a ghost energy spirit person. That all changed in the last year I spent in our apartment. I remember opening the door to the second floor apartments, walking up on a set of steps and turning on the landing. As I reached the top of the second flight, I became instantly lightheaded, as if the air had become thinner and yet heavier at the same time. It was uncomfortable, to say the least. I also struggled with anxiety. And I've never really had that feeling that I did there. Normal anxiety doesn't touch the feeling you have when you're in a space that just feels wrong. The first weeks living there, I felt anxious, as if my body was telling me to leave. I felt uncomfortable putting up a mirror in our living room. I had the most strange, unequivocal feeling of being scared to see something I didn't want to see in that mirror. There were constant foul smells and sounds lingering and moving through the space. I would feel drained the moment I stepped inside that place at the end of the day. Everything felt wrong from the moment we moved in. Energy was off. All me and my girlfriend could do was fight with one another. We'd never had any animosity in any way. Well, at least in the way that we did in that place. I truly have never felt less like myself. We would see things move in the peripherals and hear what sounded like another couple arguing coming from our vents. I have more I could say, but I'm more curious if anybody's had any similar experience. Still a little bit of processing everything as I just moved out a little over a month ago. My paranormal experience. So I joined this server just to tell my experience and see others. I've always been a fan of everything paranormal, but always keep a lot of boundaries, trying to find explanations for everything that happened to me. Most times I can debunk it, or a lot of the time it's just me scaring myself, but anyways, enough rambling. My first experience was in my grandma's house when I was only like 6. My mom's family is very aware of spirits, while my dad's side are more the logical thinking people. So I've mainly been stuck in the middle. This experience is my most unexplained one. It was late, probably midnight, and I was going to bed. So I get in bed and I start to feel scared. I get under the covers, I stay for a minute until I look back up. There is a man standing in the doorway. Note, the bed was in the middle of the room, so this man started to walk to the side of the bed away from the door. So when I got my chance, I bolted out of the room to go get my grandma. Figure was a full-on white misty thing. About a year later, I had the same thing tapping on my feet. Second experience is at my mom's current house. The house was built in 1931, and almost everybody who enters says it's haunted. As far as we know, we have 2 spirits. One of my uncle who used to live there, and my half-sister's dad, who pretty much every investigation he talks to us. He claims he follows my mom. I don't even know why, as they ended up on bad terms, apparently. My mom's current roommate also had seen a girl hanging in a mirror, and his dead dog at the end of the bed. Maybe I'll send the images one day. My mom also has heard a girl laughing. She's the only girl in the home, or at least that's when she hears the laughing, she's the only one there. My experiences there were the lights in the back room turning on and off. The kitchen cabinets that no one can reach open and close on their own. Basic stuff. Spirits don't seem to be evil, but the energy does. The farther you go north in the house, the more intense the energy. One time, just last week, I could barely breathe being in that back room. We realized there was a shift in energy right where the crawl space opening is. It's really intense by the crawl space in and out of the house. I dropped a lighter by the crawl space and found it in the basement. Potential vortex. Or further proof that lighters have legs, like I suspect. My dad is as mischievous in death as he was in life. That's my dog. So my dad died 5 years ago. It was a freak car accident while he and my older brother were driving home from sports events that they'd gone to. My dad was larger than life in every sense of the word. He was 6 feet 8 inches tall, covered in tattoos, and had this laugh that I swear you could hear across the country. He and his twin brother, they were identical by the way, they played so many pranks on us while growing up that we sort of just got used to it. That has not changed. Only now, dear Dad has the final laugh. The night of his funeral, my uncle and I were sitting together in the backyard. Uncle was telling stories about Dad and some of their wild teenage years. I remember so badly wanting to hug my dad. All of a sudden, my uncle and I hear this unmistakable sound of my dad laughing, followed by the back door slamming shut. Uncle and I stared at each other wide-eyed and then burst into laughter. 'Cause yep, that's my dad for you. The door, in case you're wondering, turned out to be locked from the inside. Uncle and I were the only ones home at the time outside of the Rottweiler beast. I don't think he can lock deadbolts. Took an hour for us to find the spare key. My dad liked to move our spare key around because it makes it harder for robbers to find, in his own words. He's continued to prank us over the years. Your keys go missing, your phone will start blaring his favorite song at 3 a.m. out of nowhere, or you'll wake up to the sound of my dog growling that distinctive rotty rumble. His laughter's always heard, as well as the scent of Old Spice, favorite cologne. We miss him every day, but he always manages to remind us that he gets the last laugh nowadays. Almost 30 years ago. Almost 30 years ago, I was spending several months in Western Europe, staying in a former monastery built in the 17th century. Very early on during my stay, I was warned by one of the girls who worked there to stay away from certain areas of the building, or at least not to go there by myself. When I asked why she said none of them ever went there alone, it was because they would see black figures staring at them from the end of the hallway. Well, I've always loved ghost stories, but I'd never seen one. Wasn't too bothered by what she told me. In fact, actually wanted to go to that area to see if I could catch something. Spoiler alert. Never saw anything there or anywhere else in the building, but that didn't mean nothing happened. I spent several months in there. It was only after I left that I started to realize something was wrong with that place. Many things happened there, but if I were to tell them all, I'd end up with a book. You see, I changed while I was there. I started hearing my name being called constantly by a voice I didn't recognize. Not only that, I couldn't even tell if it was male or female. Nothing else was said, only my name was called. Looked around, but couldn't see anyone. Oftentimes, I would hear people playing billiards, and I'd head out where the billiard table was, only to find the room deserted and the balls put away. As soon as I walked away, I would almost immediately hear the sound of play, which I knew couldn't be because I'd just been there seconds before, right? But the funny thing is at the time, I didn't think anything of it. Not of my name being called, and not of the phantom billiards game. The attic of this building was huge. It had been turned into a library. There was brand new heating and heavy new insulation installed. I'd go there to get away from people and to read. At first, there was nothing unusual. I could be there for hours with nobody else bothering me. But soon that would change. I started feeling as if someone were standing behind me. When I looked, everywhere, nobody was there. Soon I started hearing strange knocking noises behind me, and the room became so cold I could see my own breath steaming. I checked the heat and it was fine, but I felt more and more uncomfortable there. I felt unwelcome. But I still went there until one day when I went up the stairs, and even though, it was open, I was unable to pass the threshold. There's nothing blocking my way, and yet I couldn't pass no matter how hard I pushed. Tried for about 10 minutes and finally gave up. I never went to the attic again. The weird thing about it is that was this one place where I never heard my name being called. I could possibly write a book with everything else that happened, but this has taken long enough already. The thing is, I never wanted to leave. I left that place 30 years ago, and although I don't hear my name being called, I know it wants me to go back. It just sits there. I think it sits there waiting. A few experiences from 1999. This happened years ago, and I feel like it's time to share it. I'd been dating my ex-wife a while, and we lived in the basement of a small apartment that her work owned. She had left to take her cousin home while I stayed with her son. He was asleep, and I was in the living room. I got this sudden cold chill. I heard from the bedroom a voice that said, "Come here." Now I thought, okay, maybe it's from outside or just upstairs from another person. Creepy, but whatever, right? Then I heard a woman's voice say my name and ask me to come here. She says it's okay, that she won't hurt me. It scared the crap out of me. I go on the porch and leave my door open so I can hear her son if he wakes up. Yep, I left him in bed while I was hearing voices coming from the bedroom. Not my finest moment, I know. When girlfriend came back, I told her what happened, and she told me she'd heard voices before, and it was fine. Okay. Next one, we were all asleep, and her son woke up crying. I started to get up to get him a bottle when I saw her by his crib. She says not to worry about it, and she's got it and goes back to sleep. Well, rather I go back to sleep. I crawl back in bed and cuddle back with her and fall asleep, not realizing that, one, she was in two places at once. So next day it clicked and I asked her. She did get up to get her son a bottle, but she said no. Apparently she didn't. That's when I figured out that she was in bed when I got up. Last one was 2 months before we got married. Same building, but this time her younger sister was staying the night. Next day she went to a church and left the two of us there alone. She was 12, I was 22. We were talking about ghosts and stuff, and she was telling me stories that she experienced. My girlfriend later admitted that the stories were all true. But back to that day as I was shaving, she was sitting on the bed talking about a ghost when she looked at me and screamed. I turned around and she was there, but somebody was right behind me. Of course, I didn't see it, but I believed her as I could see her from the mirror, and I saw the terror in her face. When we both went back to the bedroom, my girlfriend's CD collection had been moved. One in particular was pushed out like it wanted to be seen. It was the single of The Invisible Man by 98 Degrees. These all happened in 1999. I have a few more, but I wanted to share these first. Bit of a long story, but here's my experience. I knew something was off whenever I was in a room alone, especially with my back to the entrance. I felt as if I wasn't alone, and whatever it was didn't seem to be looking for a friend, more like looking for a victim. I never felt this when I was anywhere but home, but it was still horrifying for any 7-year-old. In my bedroom one day, I was with my sister and we're sitting on the bed playing Connect 4. Nice. I had just won when we heard a knock on my door, a solid knock from the knuckles. So I stood up and opened the door, and I didn't see my parents. We had cats, but they can't knock. I didn't know what them scratching at the door sounded like. We walked over to my parents' bedroom and their door was closed. We knocked and explained what happened. They were confused and explained how they were in there the whole time and didn't knock. We all brushed it off as a one-time odd occurrence, not thinking much of it. But looking back now, that's where we went wrong. A couple of months later, I was in the basement with my sister. They were in the area off to the side, out of the way, and I was in the main area. The staircase in the center surrounded by drywall, and the other side was the workshop. So I was riding my scooter around the staircase through the workshop into the main area. One of these laps, I saw just 3 heads floating in the workshop in line. I don't remember the faces, but they were all of a man's head. They weren't moving up or down, just facing forward, all the same direction toward the staircase. I stopped as I was confused. I didn't see how they could be there. They weren't there the next lap. I found my parents and explained this to them. They were just as confused as I was. We didn't know what to do. I was only 7 or 8, so not exactly what you'd call a reliable source. We didn't do anything because, well, we kind of couldn't. Fast forward another few months and I'm in the shower rinsing my hair. We had a mirror on the wall of the shower. I saw something out of the corner of my eye. I looked up at the mirror directly and I saw a black figure emerging from the wall. Just the shape of a torso and an arm extended at my left shoulder, about to make contact with me. Then it vanished. I heard a loud drop of water, like a water bottle worth of water had fallen into a bucket. But the only place there could be a bucket that I'd hear and not see is in the closet behind the bathroom and in front of my room. But the closet's full. There's no room for a bucket. I step out of the shower, terrified without even bothering to dry off. I step out of the bathroom and tell my parents who were sitting in the room next to the bathroom. I was shaking and I was cold and I could barely get a word out. My dad sat in the bathroom as I finished my shower. That was the last shower I'd ever taken in that bathroom. At this point, my mom admitted she felt like she'd been being watched too, especially when she was working. She worked at home from the basement. Fast forward about a couple of years back. Fast forward? You mean rewind? You said fast forward, so I'll ignore the back part. Anyway, my friends have a friend over who they knew about. Well, apparently they knew about this whole thing going on. She supposedly knows about paranormal activity when she said that she felt a presence, and not a good one. We also found a Ouija board from my mom's parents. None of us ever touched it. We gave it to the same friend who knew what to do with it. Another year or so passes and we're talking with a family friend. My dad met him from work and then he quit, became a nurse. He quit being an RN and became a priest. So we had him basically bless our house and especially where everything happened. None of us has had an experience like this since. I do occasionally feel like I'm being watched, but a much weaker feeling. I told the story to some people from my BSA troop while sitting around a fire one night, and one kid said he didn't sleep that night when he talked to me the day after. A weird story that happened to me years ago. So I was never really big into the supernatural thing, and to this day I'm kind of rather doubtful of it all, but one thing I still cannot explain even after years was something that happened to me as a child. I was hearing the TV downstairs as I went to fill up my glass of water. Didn't think too much about it since my parents often fell asleep in front of the TV. However, as I went to check on them, there was absolutely no one in the room. The TV was turned off. I even touched it to see if it was warm and therefore had been recently used. Okay, I thought. I was just slightly confused, but still returned to bed. The next morning, I woke up with an unfamiliar place. It was the TV room, or the living room, in front of the TV. Now, that really freaked me out. My parents suggested they lock the doors at night since they took me for a sleepwalker. In the coming weeks, I regularly heard the TV noises, especially around midnight, even when I was 100% sure my parents were in their bedroom. But after that incident, I never checked that room again and generally avoided that lower floor at night. I moved out years ago and asked my parents about it, but they didn't really know anything about the TV running at night. Weird, right? Well, I visited last week and I was watching TV in the middle of the night. Turned it off to go to bed, and wouldn't you know it, fucking turned on again after I turned it off. No touching the remote or anything. Just jumped back alive. Well, I turned it off again and got the fuck out of there. Went to bed, woke up at the same chair like when I was a child the next morning. Right where I sat when I was watching TV the night before. So I guess I'm not too keen to visit again. I just heard an inexplicable sound coming from my parents' room. I am a student. I'm not very athletic, nor am I in any way sporty, but rather more of an academic. So when we had sports day qualifications at school for the first time in 3 years, I was forced to truly exert myself. I was fortunately able to win first place in the 100-meter sprint and qualify. I was quite proud of my victory, but I hated it just as much. I should have prepared beforehand by doing some stretches or warming up because the next day my body ached a lot. Despite the physical discomfort, went to school and was pretty much a lot of fun. We were forced to pretty much end the day with a practice march past the actual sports day. That was next week. That would have been fine had it not been 32 degrees Celsius. About 90 degrees, I think. If my body hadn't been aching, and in retrospect, I realized my throat felt somewhat constricted and I had some trouble swallowing. After school, I went for a tuition, which wasn't so bad because I went in my friend's car and was able to sit down during it, and I was able to find a taxi relatively easily. I thought tuition is just what you... Oh, never mind. As soon as I got home, my father started getting ready to leave for the hospital. He went for an appointment. My mother was already home at the time of visiting her sickly mother. However, I wasn't alone at home. I had 3 cats, and my only complaint was that it was loud because my neighbors who lived directly above my house were renovating, but all that sound ceased at around 7 or so. That's when things started to get weird. I was studying when I noticed I was feeling warm. I went into my parents' room and I got a thermometer to check my temperature. It only read 100.7. I did tell my parents because they had their own problems and instead decided to finish the chapter I was revising, then go to sleep. I had just sat down when I heard a peculiar sound. Before I go on, I must confess I am a fan of short horror stories, and being alone in the house at 7:30 in the evening, my mind began to wander. I entertained the idea of a ghost. Despite this, I am a realist, and instead tried to figure out, what made this sound. Could have been the construction workers doing renovations, but it could have been my cats. Still, it was a peculiar sound. It sounded like somebody was tapping with their fingernail against wood, with their pace sort of increasing with each tap. I was sitting at a wooden desk at the time and almost recreated the sound. A few seconds after I did, I heard the sound again, slightly louder than the one that I had made. For the second time, I recreated the sound. This time, what I heard was different. Instead, there were 2 taps, maybe 5 seconds apart. My mind began to race as I tried to consider each possibility, but my churning gray matter formed a horrible thought. I was hearing the sounds coming from what sounded like my parents' bedroom, and the only wood was the bed frame, a table, a display case, and their cupboards, which were up against the wall separating our rooms. They were made of wood. I stopped echoing the sounds, and when I did, or rather didn't, they stopped. But then I wanted to test to see whether or not what I was hearing was still there. And so I tapped, recreating the first sound, to which I was met with the creepiest of all sounds I've heard that night. I was like somebody was rolling marbles against the cupboard. I immediately covered my eyes and began to recite what I was studying mentally whilst I was doing this. There were more sounds, like another tapping, but this one sounded... It was deeper, and I don't even know how else to phrase it. Eventually the sound ceased, and I opened my eyes and began to look around my room for my cats. One of them was on my bed. The second was somewhere else around the house, and the third, who was blind in one eye, was sitting on the door, or rather at the door, looking in the direction of my parents' room. It was only when I saw the third that I realized she was meowing more than usual that night, despite her food and water bowls being full. My mother came home soon after and went into a room, into which I followed her, noticing the third cat laying down in the hall. In her room, I saw a pet toy in her room, and it was plastic with a smaller plastic ball in it, which made a sound when you shook. Thought I'd found the source of my sound. However, as I was typing this, I began to realize certain details do not add up. The toy was on the bed, not the floor. which wasn't wood, and even if it was the ball, I doubt the cat would recreate the same sound twice and with the same toy, and even deeper sound and the sound of rolling marbles. Don't lose your marbles. My experience living in a haunted house. This all happened when I was 6 years old. I still remember it so vividly. Just to preface, I'm open to the idea of the paranormal, but for the most part, I'm still a skeptic. I'm one of those, I wouldn't be surprised if ghosts really existed, but for now, I don't think they do, sort of people. I believe there's an explanation for any paranormal experience that we face, whether it's simple or complicated. My parents had immigrated from Vietnam in the 80s, did the whole Ellis Island immigration process. They lived all over the country, but fast forward to 1993, they had me in California. In 1999, my family was pretty poor and decided that we wanted to try to get a place with my cousin's family, my dad's brother's family. They went searching for a house in Sacramento, California. They found a place that was kind of oddly cheap. If I recall correctly, it was a 5-bedroom, 3-bathroom house with a gated automatic fence, and that was kind of really fancy back then. Now here are the details that were told to me later in life when I got older and spoke to my parents about this house. There was obviously a catch to the low price point of this house. The offering price was due to the fact that it was known to be haunted. The real estate agent was very upfront about this, mentioned the history of the house. The regional owner of the house died in the nursery of the house. The nursery was located underneath the stairs. Think Harry Potter sort of cupboard, but much bigger and kind of actually a room. We're unsure of what the owner died from, but my parents didn't think it was necessary to know or even remember. My dad and his brother were skeptics at the time and were only interested in the price point. The real estate agent mentioned that there had been many families that lived here, and all of them experienced paranormal activity and moved out fairly quickly. This did not stop them from taking the offer. There were many things that we experienced in this house. Some very typical, such as creaky pipes and wood or extreme or sudden cold temperatures, footsteps and things like that. However, I'd just like to share what I deemed to be the creepiest moments. Although it was a 5-bedroom house, we had to share rooms due to 2 families living in the house. I shared a room with 2 of my cousins, both around my age. One of the nights I remembered, this was a couple of weeks living here. We were already experiencing some creepy things. I really needed a drink of water. We had a pact that if we ever went somewhere in the middle of the night, we would wake each other up and go together. So I woke up my cousins and told them to come with me to get a drink of water really quick. We had an uncle that stayed with us at the time. He's that uncle that goes from family to squat for as long as he can. He still does this to this day, pretty much. He would stay anywhere he possibly could. Well, he didn't mind sort of taking the nursery over. Obviously, when we were kids, our parents didn't inform us of all the paranormal talk that they had. All of our experiences were discovered on our own. So as we walked down the stairs, we could hear our uncle groaning in his sleep, almost as though he was in pain. We sat on the stairs, continued to listen. We were trying to make out what it was trying to say. We noticed that the name Sam kept coming up. We got our water, went back down to sleep. The next day, we brought up what we heard our uncle say to our parents and told them he kept saying the name Sam. My parents looked at us in terror. They then tried to play it off and said it was nothing of concern. We were kids, but we definitely knew they were hiding something from us. But we moved on from it. When we were older and talked about this incident, our parents finally told us the truth about the incident. My parents told me and my siblings, and I eventually told my cousins who had already been told by their cousins. So apparently Sam is the name of the original owner that passed away in that nursery. They had not informed my uncle about the name of the owner. They confronted my uncle, and he too had no idea what we were even talking about. This sent chills up my spine, even so many years after the experience. So here's the last experience that was pretty much the, okay, we're moving motive. After about 4 or 5 months, we had a Lunar New Year's party. Typically, these drinking parties will go on all night, and it usually ends up in a mellow talk to each other in the living room, gathering to the end of the night sort of thing. It was probably 1 a.m. at this point, and the people that were left were all in the living room at the base of the stairs. Everyone was pretty much accounted for. The night was dying down, everyone was chatting, and suddenly, we hear doors and maybe windows start to slam shut upstairs one by one. This lasted maybe 10 seconds. It almost didn't sound real because it seemed like there were more doors and windows shutting than we ever had. Silence. As we all stopped and stared at the top of the stairs, terrified, my dad and brother started to walk up the stairs. Sort of us crept behind them. They called out to see if anybody's up there, and no response. Here's the scary part. Every single door was open. There wasn't a single door that was actually slammed shut at all. Yet we heard all these doors slam one after another. I remember so vividly crying my eyes out. My uncle came back and said, "All the doors are open." We moved out within the week. My parents never shared with me the address of the place, never wanted me to look it up any further. I don't blame them. However, I'd be really interested in looking up more of the history of the house. I've tried Googling things such as Sam Sacramento Haunted House, but found nothing. I remember what the house looked like, but as extensively as I've tried to search it up, I can't find it. I'd be interested if anybody's able to find the house I'm looking for. I'll leave a description of the house below. It's a 2-story white house, very symmetrically boxy. Big 2-car garage, black gates that surrounded the house that opened up by sliding gates that lead to the driveway in the garage. Grass lawn with a decent-sized tree. The backyard was pretty much cement and dead grass. It was located in the middle of a suburban street, otherwise known as not a corner house and not a circle or court, just a regular drive street address between 2 other houses. Try to remember the type of tree that is. That might help people. Alone and terrified by a ghost. While working as a night dispatcher for an alarm company, I received a frantic call one midnight. It was a janitor from an elementary school that we monitor. We spoke often. With trembling voice, she asked if we sent the police. An intruder was in the school. This woman was hysterical. My partner called the police as I stayed in the line with her. I asked for a description of the intruder and where she was for the police. She replied, "I'm hiding under a desk in the main office." This was serious. In my 7 years as a dispatcher, I handled bank robberies, guns to the face, break-ins, arsons, etc. I never heard anyone so scared. After calming her down, I asked her what happened. This was her reply. She was done for the night, alone in the building with all doors and classrooms locked. She was gathering her things, ready to exit and set the alarm. The building was silent. Strangely, she heard a metal garbage bag rattling. She looked to see a young red-haired woman standing over her garbage, kind of just looking at her. She was wearing a dress, pumps, a coat with a fur collar, and looked sad. Her clothes seemed old-fashioned. My janitor friend said to the woman, "Excuse me, but the school's closed. You must leave." The red-haired lady calmly turned down the hallway without saying anything. The janitor followed close behind, wondering who she was and how she got in. As she turned the corner, expecting to see the trespasser down the long corridor, no one was there. She checked all the doors along the corridor all the way to the exit, and all the doors were locked. Not to mention there was no sound of any door being opened in the quiet building. Fear set in and she ran to call me. The janitor began to cry and said, "Please send the police, hurry." I said, "What do you mean?" She wasn't there. She replied through tears. There was nowhere for her to go. I turned the corner and she was just gone. She seemed in shock or in denial. The police notified us that they were outside. All doors were locked along the outside perimeter. They wanted in. Poor, terrified janitor didn't want to leave the office. I convinced her to let the officers in, and they did a thorough search and found no signs of entry or anyone. No one was observed in the vicinity. The janitor quit, never called me again. This was 25 years ago, and there were no cameras monitoring the school at that time. My first paranormal experience. To start, this is a true story. My family and I moved from South California to Mexico, 2007. We were accompanied by two of my parents' friends along the way. My parents built a 3-story house, so we had all of our room, and parents, their friends from California, and my aunt who stayed in another room. Despite all those people in the house, I felt something was off. They told me that I was adjusting and I still hadn't really called the priest to bless the house yet. That's when he came and all would feel better. Anyway, bedtime came and my brother and I decided to sleep in the parents' bedroom the first night. I know we were old, but every other room was taken or filled with boxes. So since it's a big master bedroom, we placed our sleeping bags on the floor and called it a day. Sadly, I'm always the last one to go to sleep. So there I am waiting to fall asleep. That's when I start feeling the room go cold. Thought nothing of it, but then I started feeling very scared for no reason. I did what we all do at that age and wrapped myself in a blanket. Thought it was all in my head. But then I heard a dog breathing close to my ear. I knew that my brother was around the other side, so it wasn't him. I was really scared now, but I also feared for my family. I am the oldest. They were all asleep, and in an act of desperation and fear, I got up only to find nothing was there. I woke my dad up and told him what happened. He just thought I was exaggerating and told me to pray and sleep. This time I slept a little closer to them, and right when I was about to go to sleep, a solid steel door that we have at our entrance slammed so hard everybody jumped and woke up. And this had never happened before. The 12 years later, never happened again either. There was no wind at all, and nobody could explain how it opened without the key. They all started talking, and then they looked at me and told me to go to sleep. So I left. I woke up the next morning, and as I was making my cereal bowl, my mom asked me what I saw or what I heard. I told her. She just went pale. She said my aunt and her 2 guests saw a woman in white walk down the stairs. Moments later, the door slammed shut, and we looked, and the 7 people can't be wrong. This was one of many things to happen in our house, including 4 years of sleep paralysis daily. Old home secret door. I used to live in a home that was old. This house backed up to the woods, a lake, and other places to explore as a little kid. Everything was there for a kid, anything you could ask for. But there was one thing that bothered me the most. The secret door in my room. I'm going to try and paint a picture for you. There was a white picket fence. After the opening of the door, you would head into the main entrance. Looking inside the house from the main door, you would see a staircase that was going upstairs in front of you. Walk upstairs, and there'd be a split. Left to right, guest room, bathroom, guest room, guest room. I grew up in the 3rd guest room. Inside this room, it was stained wood everywhere, ceiling, wall, and floor. There were 2 windows. Everything creaked and made a sound. You knew exactly where you were walking to not make any sound, but one thing in this room bothered me. There was a closet with shelves. You had to open this door to see it, and under the bottom there was a loose-fitting board. If you moved it, there was a hole. Inside this hole was a crawl space, and a lot of it. Apparently, the parents found notes inside this crawl space and told me nothing about it until I was older. They just said that we found notes, apparently. This creeps me out just typing this. I can feel my hair standing up, and when I was younger, I felt my bed shake. I hardly slept because my bed was shaking at times. All I could think about was the door in my room. Keep in mind, this whole room was pretty much wood everywhere. It's the only room like that in the house. I would have dreams and horrible dreams. One night I would have a dream of the door opening. I was lifted off the bed. There's a black cloud and red eyes watching me. This cloud would bring me outside of my room. I would try and run down the stairs, but was thrown back up the stairs, all in slow motion. Once I would wake up, the bed was shaking. Not from me shaking the bed was shaking. The wooden bed was shaking in a wooden room. It was a horrible sound. This happened over and over, and to this day I don't like talking about it. I do not believe in ghosts, but I think back to this moment and question everything sometimes. Whatever was in that room didn't want me in there. Glad to be out of it. I gotta say, if something shook my bed every day, I don't know if I could barely believe in ghosts, but you do you. See ya.